3 of chapter 2. Om Bharataya Pratibodhikam Bhagavata Vyasena graditam Puranamudina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Amba Tvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Vasudevasutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Mukam Karoti Vachanam Pangum Langhayate Yakripātamaham vande Paramanandamadhavam Vyavasayatmika buddhi rekeha kurunandana Bahushakhayanantascha buddhayo vyavasayinam Yamimam pushpitam vacham pravadantyavipasthitaha Vedavadaradham partha nanyadastiti vadinaha Kamatmanam swargaparan janma karma phalapradam Kriya vishesha bahulam Bhogaishvarya gatim prati Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam Taya pavritajekasam Vyavasayatmika buddhi samadhau na vidhiyate Traigunnya vishaya veda Distraigunyo bhavarjuna Nirgvandvo nitya sattvastho Diryogaksema atmavan Yamanartha udapane Sarvatar samplutodake Tavan sarveshu vedeshu Brahmanasya vijanataha Karmanyevadhikaraste ma padeshu kadachana ma karma phalaheturbhur mate santosva karmani yogastha kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya Siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva samatvam yoga uchyate Durena yavaram karma buddhi yoga dhananjaya Buddhau sharanamanvicha kripana phalahetavaha Buddhi yukto jahatiha buddhe sukrita dushkrite Tasmad yogaya yujyasva yoga karmasu kaushalam Karmajam buddhi yuktahi phalam tyaktva manishinaha Janma bandha vinirmukta Varam gacchantyanāmayam Yadāde moha kalilam Buddhir vyatitarishyate तदागन्तासि निर्वेदं श्रोतव्यस्य श्रुतस्य च श्रुतिविप्रतिपन्ना ते यदा स्थास्यसि निश्चला समाधावचला बुद्धिस्तदा योगमवाप्स्यसि. So today we will continue where we left off last time. But last time, the last two verses we did last time, I did very quickly because time was up. And as I said then, we'll go back over them a little bit more tonight. So that we will do. We were to begin what's called the Sthita Prajna Lakshanas, the qualities of a person of steady wisdom. Which begins with Arjuna's question in verse 54 of chapter 2. The last two verses we did were 52 and 53. Those I went over very quickly, so again I want to go over them a little bit more. But in fact, we'll go back to 51, because that's really, 50, because that's really where the thought of 52 and 53 begins. So I'll just do that briefly. And then go on with the discussion of the qualities of the Sthita Prajna. Verse 50 says, Buddhi yukto jahatiha ubhe sukrita dushkrite tasmad yogaya yujyasva yoga karma sukaushalam. So as I said in the last couple of classes, in the recent verses, we've had several of the very, very famous passages from the Gita, the three of the most famous passages in the Gita. One was, I think, 47, I believe. That's Karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Yours is the right to work alone, not to the fruits of her work. Ma karma phalaheturbhu ma te sangostva karmani. Don't be attached either to inaction. Don't be a producer of fruits of action, and don't be attached to inaction also. That's an extremely famous verse, so I won't go back over that because we discussed it at length. Another was the fourth foot of the next verse, 48, which is samatvam yoga uchyate, that yoga is known as sameness, that is even-mindedness. Even-mindedness in all circumstances. Obviously a very difficult quality to attain, but essential if we want to attain to emancipation. So as with everything, there's a calculus of approaching an infinite limit. And so we start where we are, but we gradually try to approximate the ultimate limit of samatvam. But in this calculus, there is a final attainment of the ultimate limit. It's not a continual approaching with never reaching, but there is a final attainment of the ultimate. But we approach it through this graduated process. And then here in the fourth foot of verse 50 is the third of the three very famous passages in the last few verses, from 47 to 50. And that is yoga karmasu kaushalam, that yoga is skillfulness in work. So again, I won't go over this verse. We're just at length now. We're just coming back to get to the context for verses 52 and 53. So this 50 says, endued with the idea of equanimity here, one rejects both virtue and vice. Iha, here, jahati, rejects. Sukrite, ubhe, sukrita, dushkrite. Both sukrita and dushkrita. Sukrita meaning that which is well done, and dukrita, that which is badly done. but it implies here not well done as you did a good job or you did a bad job. It means virtue and vice. So that which is good action and that which is vicious action or harmful action. So having given up both, and so as I explained last time, having given up bad action that we can understand, vicious action, harmful action that we can understand, but give up good action, well, it doesn't mean actually not doing good things. It means giving up attachment to both. If by mistake you do something wrong you weren't intending to, then learn to let it go. Learn from it. Realize that, okay, then this I did, I shouldn't have done that. Next time I'll try harder. But don't let it go on over and over and over in the mind, just to learn to let it go. And the good things that you do, don't dwell on that also, that, oh, I did such a good thing. Did anybody notice me who saw that? Maybe I got good karma. Maybe my life will turn around now. Maybe this will happen. Maybe that will. No, you just did an action to let it go, let it go. So learn to let everything go, the good actions and bad actions. Again, without misunderstanding that to mean that it doesn't matter what you do. Just do anything and let it go. It doesn't matter. No, not like that. But once you've done something, trying to do the right thing, once you've done something, then let it go, whether it comes out well or whether it comes out ill. And then bad things that you've done in the past, don't continually go over that. The mind, even when we're in our 70s or 80s, the mind will go back to something I did when I was 15 years old. I think, why did I do that? Oh, why did I shouldn't have done. Hey, that was so many years ago. 70 years ago, and you're still thinking, why did I do that? Hey, well, it happened, you were a kid, it's gone. So with more recent actions also, learn to let things go. So having rejected both virtue and vice, strive for the yoga of equanimity. Because yoga is known as skill in action, which is the skill in action which allows us to give up both virtue and vice. And then 51, karmajam buddhiyuktahi phalam tyaktva manishinaha janma bandha vinirmuktaha param gachyantyanāmayam. Because by giving up the results produced by actions, karmajam, phalam, those who are endued with the idea of equanimity, that is buddhi yukta, those who are joined to this wisdom of equanimity, become wise, manishinaha, they become manishinaha, and being fully freed from the bondage of birth, janma bandha vinir muktaha, completely freed, vinir mukta, from janma bandha, from the bondage of birth, reach the state beyond illness or beyond disease. Gachyantyanāmayam. Here disease means the disease of samsara, the disease of this recurring disease. We all have this recurring disease like malaria, where we die and think that, well, okay, now I'm done with it, and then pretty soon we find we're born again, back in the same situation. So this disease of the world, disease why? Because disease means that which is contrary to the natural stable state. And so when I get a disease in the body, it's because the body is not functioning properly. When I have a disease of the mind, it's because the mind is not functioning properly. But this disease is the ultimate disease, and that is what we are is one with God. Our nature is divine. Our nature is all blissful, all knowing, all blissful, ever pure, ever content, free from all suffering whatsoever, completely free, where it's impossible to suffer. And yet we find ourselves suffering so much, with so many limitations. Limitations on what we know and understand. The mind is clouded. Limitations on our existence. We feel like we're constricted to this little body. In this vast universe, I'm just this little speck of a human body, which is so frail and so subject to the conditions of the outer world. So this is the disease we suffer from. We're not in our natural state. In the modern world, which is controlled right now by the Western paradigm, the Western way of looking at things, it's especially important to deal with the question of what is natural. Even if we go to the grocery store, we have to decide whether to buy natural products or unnatural products, artificial products. And so everybody wants to know what is natural, because there's the idea that natural is good, artificial is bad. And that's a sound idea, that natural is good, artificial is bad. In general, it's a sound idea. But spirituality, whether it's Vedantic spirituality or the spiritual traditions of other religions, it's asking us to do something that looks unnatural. That is, it's asking us to transcend all of this. How could that be natural? Well, it is natural, because our present state is highly unnatural. We're seeing the world as material. There's no such thing as matter. Matter is an imagination. It's a wrong reading of spirit, a wrong reading of consciousness. And so we are all suffering from this disease of seeing everything as dull, dead, and sentient matter. We're suffering from this disease of seeing myself separate from everything else. This disease of seeing myself as subject to birth and death. The disease of seeing myself subject to all kinds of suffering. Physical suffering, mental suffering, social suffering, so many types of suffering. That's a disease. And so the natural state is to be free from all of that. So when your mind will go beyond the, 51. Because by giving up the results produced by actions, those who are endued with the idea of equanimity become wise, fully freed from the bondage of birth, they reach the state of beyond disease, yes. So we reach the state beyond disease, which is the natural state. And then 52, Yada te moha kalilam buddhir vyatitarishyati tadagantasi nirvedam shrotavyasya shrutasya cha. So yada te moha kalilam buddhir vyatitarishyati. So yada te buddhi, when your buddhi, moha kalilam vyatitarishyati, when your buddhi, when your understanding, when your consciousness will overcome the confusion of delusion, the turbidity, the muddiness, the obscurity of delusion, tadagantasi nirvedam, then you'll come to dispassion, true dispassion. What kind of dispassion is he speaking of here? Shrota vyasya shrutasya cha. That which should be heard, shrota vyasya, and shrutasya cha, and that which has been heard. So as I explained last time, this comes in the context of the previous verses starting with 41, where he's talking about the Vedas, and how the Vedas teach a limited view, and he's speaking about the pre-Upanishadic part of the Vedas, how they teach a limited view of human life, where that which is to be desired is life in a heavenly world, where we go for long enjoyment. So it's, as I explained last time, those passages are critical of the early part of the Vedas. Not that the early part of the Vedas don't contain great wisdom. They do, tremendous wisdom. And there's much that we can learn from the early part of the Vedas. But the general worldview that's presented in the early part of the Vedas is one where we seek the good things of this world and the good things of the heavenly world. The Upanishads brought a revolution. It was foreshadowed in the Vedas, the early part of the Vedas themselves, but not fully flowered until the Upanishads, where they said, no, the goal of life is not to get the good things of this life and to go to heaven and enjoy life there for a long time. The goal is to attain to illumination. The goal is to know yourself to be one with God, transcendent over all worlds. That's the goal. Now, that's a very lofty goal, but we need to know where we're going in life. Then that gives meaning to everything else that we do in life. If I'm going from here to Los Angeles, I need to know, if I'm going to Los Angeles, I need to know that's where I'm going. Because if I know I'm going to Los Angeles, then when I go out of the parking lot here, then I know whether I should start off by turning right or turning left. And if I turn right when I get to 6, should I go left or should I go right on 6? Every turn that I make in the long journey from here to Los Angeles makes sense in terms of getting me to Los Angeles. If I don't know where I'm going, then none of my turns have any real ultimate significance. I might just be going in circles and think I'm having a good time. No, I have something important to do in Los Angeles. I have to get there, and I'm just driving blindly, going down this road, going down that road, looking at the scenery and things, and soon I find that I'm lost. I'm lost, I'm hungry, I'm out of gas, and then I die. So we don't want to do that. We want to know where we're going. So it doesn't matter that the goal of illumination is a long way off. That doesn't matter. Let it be wherever it is. But that's the ultimate solution of the problems of life. So if I take one step towards that in this life, I'm that much closer. If I don't take that step, then I'm no closer at all. So if I know where I'm going, then let me start taking a step towards it. The difference between this goal, the ultimate goal of life, and driving to Los Angeles, for instance, is that in driving to Los Angeles, you're not there until you get there, and there are no benefits along the way. It's just travel. But in this, there are benefits from the beginning. Every step that you take, it begins to benefit you. Every step that you take, it improves the quality of your mind, your mental experience, your sense of self, the clarity of your mind, your sense of understanding. Everything begins to improve. And so this is a journey where every step brings its benefit. But unless you know where you're going, then you don't even know where to put your foot next for the next step. So again, there's value. It doesn't matter how far the goal is away from us. There's value in knowing where that goal is and then taking steps however we can. If they're baby steps, that's okay. That will get us there too. Every step will get us there. So when your mind will go beyond the turbidity of delusion, then you will acquire dispassion for what has to be heard and what has been heard. That is, he's speaking about the shrotavyasya shrutasya. He's talking about shruti. That is, that which should be heard from the scriptures and that which has been heard from the scriptures. You go beyond all of that. As Sri Ramakrishna said, you make a shopping list. I need this, 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 and this. And when you've done your shopping, you can throw the list away. And so the scriptures are like a shopping list. They tell you what you need. They're not a substitute for realization. They're valuable just as a shopping list is valuable, but they have the limited value of a shopping list. It's valuable to let you know what you're supposed to get. And so the scriptures tell you what you need to do in order to get to illumination. But once you've gone high enough, then they lose all value. You go beyond the Vedas. And as Swamiji said, speaking of the ideal of sannyasa to Mary Hale, he said, Mary, you have not understood the sannyasi. The sannyasi stands on the head of the Vedas. So in other traditions, you can't say that. In Buddhism, to some extent, yes, because it comes from the same roots. But in other religions, no. The scripture is always on top of your head. As Swamiji said, every Westerner walks around with a church on top of his head, and on top of the church there's a book. And it proves the divinity, he didn't say this, but it's implied in what he said, that it proves the divinity of human beings, that still they can walk around with a church on their head and a book on top of that. And so the goal of life is to attain to illumination, not to become pundits of the scriptures. So then coming now to 53 and 54. 53 says, Shrutivi pratipannate yada stasyasi nischala samadha vachala buddhis tada yogamavapsyasi. So Shrutivi pratipannate yada stasyasi nischala. So when your buddhi, when your intelligence has been Shrutivi pratipanna, which has been bewildered by hearing so much about the scriptures, conflicting opinions about what the scriptures mean, and different schools of thought about the scriptures and so forth. When your mind, which was bewildered by hearing the scriptures, will remain undisturbed and undistracted in the Supreme Self, Yadastasyasi nischala, without any movement. When the mind will remain without movement, stasyasi, when it will be established without any movement. So you've given up all of this concern about what you should read, what you shouldn't read, what you need to learn, what you don't need to learn. No, you've gone beyond all of that. Samadha vachala buddhi, and your buddhi has become established in samadhi. The intelligence has become established in samadhi. Tada yoga mavapsyasi. Then you will have attained to yoga. Then you will have attained to yoga. So as it says here, when your mind, which was bewildered by hearing, will remain undisturbed and undistracted in the Supreme Self, then you will attain to yoga. So again, that's again comes in that context where he's talking about the limitations of the scriptures. And then we come to the question of Arjuna in verse 54. So this is what we were to take up tonight anyway. So this says, it begins with Arjuna said, Arjuna vacha stita prajnasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava stita jim prabhasheta kimasita vrajeta kim. So here Sri Krishna has been talking about when the mind is established in samadhi, when the mind is nischala, when the mind can't be moved by anything, when the mind is established in samatvam, in sameness, when the mind has attained to yoga. So Arjuna naturally wants to know, stita prajnasya ka bhasha. Bhasha here means description. What is the description? What are the indicates, the question indicates, what are the lakshanas, what are the qualities of the stita prajna, the person of steady wisdom, stita prajna, person of steady wisdom, whose mind is not shaken by anything, whose mind is perfectly established in sameness, perfectly established in yoga. So he's talking, Arjuna is asking about asking Sri Krishna to explain what is the nature of one who has attained to this ultimate condition of having the mind established in wisdom. Samadhistasya keshava, of the person who is established in samadhi. So what is the nature of one established in wisdom, O Krishna, of one who is established in samadhi? Stita dhi kim prabhasheta, one whose intelligence, dhi, is stita, one whose intelligence is completely steady. Kim prabhasheta, how does he speak? Kimasita, how does he sit? Vrajeta kim, how does he move about? So what is the description of a person of steady wisdom, of one whose mind is established in samadhi? How does such a person speak? How does such a person sit? How does such a person walk? Those, when you think about it, that's a little strange, the question at first, when you first think about it, a strange question. How does the person sit? How does he speak? How does he walk about? Well, it seemed that such a person would be the same as anybody else. They established in wisdom, so the qualities of a stita prajna, you would think, should be all internal. They should be internal. They're not external. So why should it make a difference in how he walks, how he speaks, how he sits, etc.? So why ask about these externalities of the person of steady wisdom when the wisdom is inside, not outside? Well, no, the answer to that is that there was much more wisdom in Arjuna's question than is first evident. And that is that the person who's established in a high spiritual state, everything about them is different. Everything about them is different. Yes, you see them walking about. You may see them speaking with other people. You may see them making decisions. You may see them sitting quietly, or you may see them sitting and talking with other people. But if you watch, you begin to see there's something quite distinct and different about them. When I used to see Swami Vireshwaranandaji, Same with, there were three Swamis that, there were many Swamis I knew, of course, in my early years in India, but there were three who made a very deep visual impression on me. One was Swami Vireshwaranandaji Maharaj, the president of the order at that time. Another was Swami Nirvananandaji, the vice president and disciple of attendant from Swami Brahmananda. And a third was Swami Saradeshanandaji, Gopesh Maharaj, who was a disciple and attendant on Holy Mother. So all three were very great Swamis, spiritually very great. But all three of them, whenever I would see them, there was something quite distinct, just visually about looking at them. I always had the feeling that I was seeing spirituality in visible form. They didn't look like ordinary people. You couldn't describe it, you couldn't paint it, because it was not in their eyes, not in the shape of their nose, not in the way they held their mouth, not in their physical form, nothing like that. And no, it wasn't like there was blue lightning coming out off of their bodies or anything like that. No, there was nothing you could describe in visual terms, and yet you could see it visually. You could see it visually. There was something quite distinct. All three of them to me used to look like they were solidified or concretized spirituality. That they didn't look like they were fleshly people, people made out of ordinary flesh and blood like the rest of us. Not because they were born that way, but because they had attained to a high state, and that radiates through every part of their person, such extraordinary people. I've known many other spiritual people, but not many others of that height, where it was actually visibly present, where looking at them you could actually see and feel that you were looking at spirituality itself. There are other great spiritual people who were not at that height, where it was not evident. But in them you felt like you were looking at spirituality itself. And so they're sitting, they're talking, they're walking. There was something special about it. I've said once before here, I think, that when I was in the training center in the mid-1970s, Swami Saradeshanandaji, the disciple of Holy Mother, who lived in Vrindavan for many, many years, all of his last years, for several decades, he came to Bellarmine for 2 months while I was in training center, and I would go and see him almost every night after supper. And in the afternoon, when my classes were over, I would go to the corner of what's now known as the VIP quarters, where those of you who are familiar with Bellarmine, it's where Swami Prabhanandaji stays now, and where formerly Swami Atmastanandaji, when he was vice president, used to stay. So those, it's always called the trustee building now. It used to be the VIP quarters, now it's called the trustee building. But Gopesh Maharaj was staying on the ground floor of that building. And so I would go to the corner of the building and just watch him pace up and down in the courtyard there. He would go and take his afternoon exercise. He was in his mid-80s at that time. And so he wouldn't walk far, he'd just pace a little bit, slowly up and down the courtyard. But it was such a beautiful sight just to see him walking. And again, there's nothing that you could describe about it. He was an old man, he was a little bit of a limp and everything, and a slow walker. It was not, again, something that you could draw or that you could reproduce in a movie or anything. It was just something that shone through his very being. And just the way of walking, there was such a beauty about it. So Arjuna is asking for this description, and description including how does such a person speak, how does such a person sit, how does such a person walk. And so the rest of this chapter is an answer to that question. The next verse answers the first part about the description of a person of steady wisdom who is self-absorbed, stitadhi, who is samadhi stasya, who is established in samadhi. Sri Krishna says in verse 55, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atmanyevatmana tushta stita pragnastarutyate. So this one he answers the first part of the question. The one who is established in samadhi, what is the description of him? The next two verses after this, then he answers, how does such a person speak? And then the 6 verses after that, he answers the question, how does such a person sit? And then the rest of the chapter, how does such a person move about? So here, Sri Krishna says, Sri Bhagavan Vacha, the Blessed Lord said, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan parthamanogatan. So yada, when such a person, prajahati, gives up, renounces, sarvan kaman, all desires. When such a person gives up all desires, manogatan, which are seated in the mind, which are present in the mind. So when a person gives up all desires which are in the mind, atmanyeva atmana tushta, who is tushta, who is content. Atmani eva, who is content in the self alone. Atmana, by the self, who is content by the self, in the self. Stita prajnastarochate. Tada, stita prajna uchyate. Tada, such a person is called a stita prajna. So when such a person has given up all desires of the mind and is content in the self alone, by the self, then such a one is known as a stita prajna. So this is describing the highest state of the stita prajna, who is absorbed in samadhi. There's not the least a trace of desire. Swami Nirvanananda, whom I mentioned as one of those 3 that was so impressive, he was the attendant of Swami Brahmananda. And Swami Brahmananda, when he was passing away in 1922, he called all of his disciples that could be called to come to his bedside, and everyone that could come to him, he blessed each one of them. But he called his attendant specially, this Swami Nirvanananda, Surya Maharaj. And said, my child, you have served me so well. You have served me so well. I bless you. But what can I give you? I'm a penniless fakir. I'm a penniless beggar. So what can I give you? But I bless you that you have the knowledge of Brahman in this very life. So what more blessing could one get than that? I bless you that you have the knowledge of Brahman in this very life. So I knew him. I used to go to him daily when I was in Belamat to make pranam, and he was one that I was extremely fond of. And so he, in his late old age, someone asked him, Maharaj, Swami Brahmananda blessed you that you have the knowledge of Brahman in this very life. Have you had that knowledge of Brahman? And so Surya Maharaj said, by the grace of Sri Ramakrishna, by the grace of Holy Mother, by the grace of Swamiji, and by the grace of Swami Brahmananda, not a single desire arises within my mind. And so then the Swami asked, but Maharaj, is that what is known as Brahmajnana? And so again he said, by the grace of Sri Ramakrishna, by the grace of Holy Mother, by the grace of Swamiji, and by the grace of Swami Brahmananda, not a single desire arises within my mind. So again, the Swami asked a 3rd time, and again for a 3rd time he said the same thing. And so of course that is Brahmajnana. That's one way of, that's, you could say the negative, not negative in a bad way, but a negative way of describing Brahmajnana as describing it as absence. That when no desire whatsoever arises in the mind, then the person is established in samadhi. And so he said that not a single desire arises within my mind. And to see him, you felt that he was always atmanyeva atmana tushta. He was always contented by the self within the self. That there was never, his mind never went out to seek anything. His mind was always established like this. And he was always noted for sitting extremely upright like this. He never used an easy chair where you sit back like this. He always sat up like this, even in his old age. Of course, he had a chair with a padded but stiff back, so it would support his back in his old age, but still he would sit like this. He would come into his room to make pranam, and he would just be, and you go in make pranam, and at the most he would like that. But with him, it wasn't just the way he looked and the way the expression on his face and all of that, but you felt that he was in a higher plane, that he was not not at all in the what we consider the ordinary state of consciousness. He was in the normal state of consciousness. We're in the abnormal state of consciousness. So he was Gacchantyanamyam. They go beyond all the disease of this world. So he had gone beyond the disease of this world and perfectly established in wisdom. And so seeing him, you could get some idea of the steadiness of mind that day after day for 2 years during my training center, and afterwards I had occasion to see him when I would come down from Mayavati on rare occasions. But whenever you'd go to see him, just always, no need to go anywhere, no need to do anything, just always content. There were occasions when he seemed to leave that state, but those were delusory, or those were illusionary. Once some brahmacharyas had come from one of the American centers where there was some trouble, and Swami Nirvanananda, being a trustee of the order, had heard about the trouble in the center, and he wasn't happy with the Swami that was running the center and what he was doing. So these brahmacharis went and made pranam and said, "Oh, Maharaj, we've come from such and such a center in America. We're here in Baramat to get initiation," and so forth. And so Swami Nirvanananda said, "What? You are from such and such?" And they said, "Yes, Maharaj." And then for 15 minutes he scolded them severely. Of course, they were just new brahmacharyas. They had nothing to do with what was going on in the center. It wasn't their fault. But anyway, he scolded them severely. And they were shocked. And because it's such a heavy scolding, with a man with so much power and so much concentration of mind, when they scold you, it's a terrible thing. And then after 15 minutes, he sat back straight, and said, "Of course I have no emotion." Just again in that state. And so when he said it, he meant it. If somebody like me says it, it means I'm trying to pretend like I have no emotion, I'm trying to get over it. But with him, no. He could, if he felt that there was some need to, he could rouse all of that power and direct it for a particular teaching purpose. But when that was accomplished, then just absorbed back in his natural state. And so he was, he had kaman sarvan prajahati. He had given up all desires of the mind, manogatan, and atmanyevatmana tushta. He was contented by the self, in the self. Contented with the self, in the self. That is, the desire for nothing outside of the self. The self itself is infinite. There is nothing outside of the self. The self is the reality within everything. It's the joy within everything. It's the wisdom within everything. It's the light within everything. It's the desirability within everything. So if we have that, how could we possibly want anything else? We can't. And so he was content within that. So that again is the answer to Arjuna's the first part of his question. What is this description of one who is established in samadhi? And so that is this. And then in 56 and 57, he begins to talk about the second part. How does such a one speak? So 56 says, Dukkeshvanudvigna mana sukheshu vigataspriha vitaraga bhaya krodha stitadhir munirutyate. So the Muni, the sage, stitadhi, of steady intelligence, the sage of steady intelligence, is said to be one who is vitaraga bhaya krodha. He is vita, he is free of raga bhaya krodha. Raga, that is attraction to anything. He's free of attraction to anything. Nothing can attract his mind because he's attained to the all. He's attained to that which is everything. Where is his mind to be attracted by little reflection of that? He has the whole in its infinity. Why is he going to look for a little spark with all of its limitations? There's no need for it. So he's free from raga, attraction, bhaya, free from fear of anything. There's no fear whatsoever. Swami Ashokanandaji used to say that when he first went to Belarmat and saw the great disciples of Ramakrishna, he said that he had never seen such remarkable people. And again, he mentions just looking at them, just looking at them, that he felt that he was seeing completely free, liberated people. And he was just a teenager at the time when he first went to Belarmat. But he said that I'd never seen such people. I never knew that such people could even exist. So completely free, and free, absolutely free from fear, completely fearless. Once when Swami Turiyanandaji was hiking in the, or walking in the Himalayan foothills, I believe it was in the Himalayas, it might have been in the plains, I forget now. Anyway, he was wandering in India. And that day, the British, of course, in control of India, they were very suspicious of sadhus because they were afraid that sadhus were involved in, or were actually revolutionaries hiding as sadhus. And so a policeman came up to Swami Turiyanandaji and said, you see, I'm an Indian policeman, but working for the British, of course, in the British police force. He said that, you know that I could arrest you if I wanted to. You sadhus are like this and you're like that and so forth. I could arrest you if I wanted to. And Swami Turiyananda was just calm and quiet, and said, well, you must be afraid of me. And Swami Turiyananda said, what? I'm not afraid of death itself. What fear can you cause for me? He said it with such conviction that it set the other man to shaking. He had no fear of death itself. What could possibly cause him fear? When he knew that he was eternal, he knew that he was the eternal blissful self, that there was no death, there was no birth, there was no delusion for him. So what could possibly cause him fear? So such a one is free of all attraction, free of all fear, and free of krodha, free of all anger. They get angry over nothing. What can cause them anger? What is it that causes us to get angry? Why do we sometimes get angry? We get angry because something that we want is frustrated. Maybe we want something to be a certain way and somebody has messed it up. And we get angry because they messed up and it should be like this. They should have put it here, but they put it like that. Why did they do that? So we go over, put it like that. Or somebody says something to us that they think, why did they say that to me? They shouldn't have said that. And you may be justified. I mean, anger, not justified in getting angry, but it may be right that they shouldn't have said that to you. But it doesn't matter. The anger hurts who? The anger hurts us. The anger hurts us. Sometimes if we get angry enough, we can insult the other person strongly enough so the other person feels bad. And so then what has happened? Now two people feel bad. Before one person was feeling bad, now two people feel bad. So what? We're still feeling bad, and now they're also feeling bad. We haven't really gained anything. We didn't get rid of our problems. We've just made somebody else feel bad. So such a person is beyond all possibility of anger because they're completely content in the self. Completely content in the self. When Swami Nirvanananda scolded these brahmacharis, it was not because he was going to get anything out of it, not because they were doing something that bothered him personally, and he thought that they shouldn't have done that because that bothers me. No, he was doing it from an impersonal standpoint, which is why he was allowed, his mind could freely go back into its natural state so easily and immediately. He did it because he saw for the good of the order that this was a problem that needed solving. And so he said what he needed to say. And once he felt that he had accomplished whatever he could accomplish, then he was back to the same. Of course, I have no emotion. So that's obviously a very high state. But that's what we want to attain to. So, Stita Dhira Muni Uchite, such a person of steady wisdom is called one who is Vita Raga Bhaya Krodha, free of attraction, fear, and anger, those three. Dukesh Vanu Dvignamana, whose mind is undisturbed in the midst of misery. Sukeshu vigatas prihaha. And who in the midst of happiness is free of attachment to the happiness. And so as Swami Gambhirananda translates the verse, here it says the monk. That's unfortunate because it doesn't say monk. It says the muni, and muni can be anyone. Muni is the sage. So the sage whose mind is unperturbed in sorrows, who is free from longing for delights, and who is devoid of attachment, fear, and anger, is called a man of steady wisdom. Stitadhi. So Madhusudana Saraswati says that this one and the next verse answer the first question, or the second question, how does such a person speak? So that's not immediately obvious here. So the reason why Madhusudana Saraswati says that this is the beginning of the answer to how does such a person of steady wisdom speak is because they give no expression. They give no expression to these things. How do we know that a person is free of desire, free of anger, and so forth? It's from their appearance, but also from their speech. But admittedly, in this verse, it's not quite so clear that it's talking about how does such a person speak. It's also just how do they act. But anyway, that's Madhusudana Saraswati's interpretation. But the next verse, 57, and this will be the last one we take for tonight. The next verse is more clearly connected to how does such a person speak. Yas sarvatra nadhisnehas tat prapya shubha shubham nabhinandati nadveshti tasya prajna pratisthita. So yas sarvatra nadhisnehas tat prapya shubha shubham nabhinandati nadveshti tasya prajna pratisthita. Tasya prajna pratisthita. His wisdom is steady, who has no attachment for anything anywhere, who neither praises nor hates anything whatever, good or evil, when he comes across it. So the person who, whatever he comes across, whatever comes in his path of life, he neither hates nor does he desire it. Everything just comes and passes with his mind undisturbed. So he doesn't praise nor does he blame. Everything is the same. There are different types of saintliness, different types of sageliness, different expressions of high spirituality. And so one of the great examples in the modern world of a Sthita Prajna, a person of steady wisdom, is of course Ramana Maharshi. If you read his life, you find that he was the perfect expression of Sthita Prajna. And the lives of some of the direct disciples of Ramakrishna also, like Swami Turiyananda and some of Swami Trigunatita and some of the others. In Ramana Maharshi you find this ideal very highly expressed. What about Sri Ramakrishna? Sri Ramakrishna was Gunatita. He was beyond all description. Sri Ramakrishna didn't even care for the state of a Sthita Prajna. He prayed to the Divine Mother, "Oh Mother, don't make me like a stick or a stone." So one time he was laughing and dancing, another time he was weeping, another time he was running, another time he was dancing, going into ecstasy, and then telling jokes with his disciples and so forth. And so, as he said, I like all the notes of the scale. But that was not like us in our present condition, where we can't go to the top note, but we sure like the lower notes. We like to play the lower notes because that's all that we can play. But Sri Ramakrishna was a master of all of them. He could have remained as a Sthita Prajna. He could have remained, after he attained to Nirvikalpa Samadhi and was in that state for 6 months, he could have remained there until he died. He certainly had that power, but he went beyond even that. So to understand the Sthita Prajna, we don't go to Sri Ramakrishna, because he was even greater than that. But we can go to someone like Ramana Maharshi, because he was the ideal of the Sthita Prajna, one who was completely content in the self, by the self. When he was living on the Arunachala, he once stepped on a hornet's nest, And this hornets, of course, came. It was a nest in the ground. He accidentally stepped on it. And the hornets came and began to sting him. And so he just stood there and gave them his leg, stuck out his leg and let them sting it. And told people later, when his leg was covered with welts, that I did wrong in stepping on them, so it was natural that they would be upset, so I allowed them to express their anger. He was completely, the hornets sting me or don't sting me, it doesn't matter to me. When he was, before that time, when he was still living in the Arunachala, or the Tiruvannamalai temple, living in a little room underground in the temple, spending his whole day in silent, unmoving meditation. Some flesh-eating worms began to enter into his legs and began to eat the flesh of his legs, and he did nothing about it. He for the rest of his life, he had scars on his legs where the worms had eaten the flesh. Now, I've told that to people before, and they think, oh, that's horrible, that's horrible. It's horrible for us. What does it matter to Ramana Maharshi, who knows that I'm the eternal self? I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm the eternal self. Who cares what happens to this body? It doesn't matter, this isn't me. For us, because this is so important, we think, oh, that's horrible. That's horrible. How could, if that's what spirituality is, I don't want it. But no, that's because we don't know what that state is. So, so the wisdom of that person remains established, who has no attachment for anything, anywhere, who neither praises nor hates anything, whatever, good or evil, when he comes across it. So who neither expresses desire for nor expresses blame or hatred for anything. Such is the way that prabhashit. Such is the way that the person of steady wisdom speaks, without praising, without blaming anything, without being attracted or without being turned away by anything. So again, whenever studying any scripture, any sacred text, we always have to think when we read something like this, well, what does that mean to me? What does that mean for me? What am I supposed to do with this? So again, this ideal looks so high and so far from our present experience. What could it possibly mean to me? But no, if I know that that's the direction that I want to go, then I start moving slowly, baby step by baby step, in that direction rather than in the opposite direction. When I get so excited about something, just to remind myself, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Let it go. Let it go. Somebody does me wrong and I want to hold on to it. Why did they do that? I'm going to make them pay for this. No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Let it go. That doesn't mean making yourself an object of abuse. That doesn't mean accepting abuse. It doesn't mean letting people walk all over you and trample on you and hurt you and take things from you and, oh, what can I do? What can I do? I'm just a helpless spiritual aspirant. I can't do anything. No, it doesn't mean that. But it means that you learn to let everything go. What has happened has happened. Let it go. Once it's happened, learn to let it go. Because if you don't, you're only hurting yourself. Only hurting yourself. So let things go. Learn to forget the things that need to be forgotten. Not forget in the sense that you don't know what ever happened, that if somebody reminds you of it, you, gee, I don't remember anything like that. No, it doesn't mean that you get premature dementia or something like that. It means that you consciously decide that's so unimportant that I'm not going to bring it to mind. And if it keeps coming to mind, you say, it doesn't matter, let it go, let it go. And if it continues to come to mind after that, you pray to Thakur, Mother, you please take this away. I don't need this anymore. You please help me to remove this from the mind. Let it go, let it go. And if it still comes, just know, at least know, that it doesn't matter. You come to the mind, you do what you like in the mind, you come when you want to, go when you want to, but I have other things to think about. I'm not going to deal with you right now. So you just, I'm going to pay attention to other things. You do what you have to do while you're sitting in my mind, and you show yourself to the door because I'm too busy even to show you to the door. So let it go. So if we know which direction we're going, then many problems in life are solved. One of the great blessings of age, of getting older, is if we allow it. If we allow it. If we want to be teenagers when we're 70 or 80 or 90, then we're going to be disappointed because that we're not going to be teenagers. But if we allow the aging process to give us the wisdom that it wants to give us, one of the great benefits of aging is that we find so many things just don't matter. First of all, because I don't even have the energy to let them matter anymore. And then you see that so many things have come and gone, so many things have happened, it just really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. When you're young, everything matters. Everything matters. But when you get older, no, it doesn't matter. Let it go. Let it go. It just doesn't matter. That's a great benefit of aging. So we'll stop here. Let me see if there's one or two questions, and then we'll close. No questions. Okay. So Samudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya, and yet that remains ever the same. Oh, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all the beings of the universe. So for announcements.